Welcome back to Honda Garage Idaho. In this video we're taking a look at part 7 of our K-Swap series for this 2011 Honda CR-Z. And this video is going to be a little shorter than the previous ones have been because today we're going to be focusing mainly on getting the exhaust system done, getting the car fully street ready to drive, maybe buttoning up some of the body panels, the hood, the windshield wipers and all that. But there's not that much we're going to go over today specifically, so let's get right into it. Now, I still have a bit of work to do around the car. New body panels need to be painted and installed. Windshield wipers and cowling needs to be done. Hood and gas struts, and of course getting our air conditioning hooked up and running, as well as a tune on the engine to get it optimally tuned for performance. But the main thing is getting this exhaust system hooked up so I can actually drive this for more than 3 minutes at a time. Now, with your K-Swap CR-Z, you have a few options when it comes to exhaust, and it's going to be heavily dependent on what your budget is, as well as, like a lot of what we've previously discussed, your specific engine choice, your suspension choice if you're keeping a sway bar. A big factor is going to be if this is something you can DIY or if you have a friend that has the tools and ability to do this kind of manufacturing. For my build here, what I'm actually doing is having a fully custom exhaust done. I'm doing this for a few reasons. It is definitely going to be more expensive, but I want to be able to specify a few things, have the maximum performance gain that I can out of this engine. So we are going to tow this up with our trusty Honda Odyssey. So for starters, let's get this loaded up on the dolly and get it taken over to the exhaust place that's local to me. They're going to do all the fabrication. And then while that's going on, we can sit down and discuss some of the alternative ways that you can get the exhaust hooked up on your K-Swap CR-Z. When you're towing with the dolly, please leave your e-brake down. Tow dolly is definitely not the ideal situation for this, especially if your CR-Z is lowered. On this U-Haul one that I rented, the ramps are basically pressing up against the side skirts here. For me, it's not a big deal because I'm replacing them anyway, so body damage is not my biggest concern right now, but just keep that in mind. A full trailer might be more optimal if you are sitting on low suspension, and of course the swap does add some weight to the front end as well. But there we are, so let's get this driven down to the shop and see what they can do for us. Alright, let's hit the road. Here we are. Goodbye, little one. See you in a couple weeks. Okay, so while my custom exhaust gets done, let's sit down and talk through the other options you have for your CR-Z. So what is going to be the best way to go for exhaust on your K-Swap CR-Z? Well, you have a few options, and it's going to depend mostly on your budget and what you want to get performance-wise out of the vehicle. Most likely the cheapest option by a good margin is going to be DIY. If you have access to the tools and materials and the skills to fabricate your own exhaust system, or you're friends with someone who does, a DIY route is a great way to go. It will be the least cost in terms of labor time if you're using your own labor. It also gives you a ton of flexibility. You can choose, your piping diameter, make it work however you want under the body of the car, set up the sensors you need, do a center exit or dual exit, however you want to fabricate it. And so you just have a ton of options there, so you can really tailor it to your liking at a low cost. Of course, the hang-up is you do have to be able to actually make it yourself and do a decent job so that it holds up for a while. One thing you can do if you're DIYing is try to reuse the stock Civic header and kind of cut the end off. Do a custom adapter to your factory CR-Z piping if you want to save some more money, but that could be pretty restrictive. Hasport does suggest that you can reuse that, but do note that if you want to do that and keep the exit exactly the same way the stock Civic SI header points, you're going to have issues with clearance on the factory sway bar, so that is going to be a problem. You might have to fabricate some more stuff there to go around that, or remove your sway bar entirely. Now, your mid-range option is to throw parts together from a few different manufacturers to build a custom exhaust system that is prefabricated from different points. For example, ASP makes a custom K-Swap header for the CR-Z. They offer it for both K20 and K24 according to their website. And this is a header that will come right down off the engine and give you a V-band right onto the rest of your exhaust system, however you want to do that. This system is automatically catless. It does include a bung for your O2 sensor and things like that. But keep in mind, you'll still have to figure something out for the rest of the piping, and you probably won't be able to reuse your CRZ OEM piping because this will be a different diameter and a different fixture. So that's kind of your mid-range option, and that will still get pretty pricey. Now your final option is to go full custom. Far and away, this will probably be the most expensive route to go, and it is kind of your only option if you don't have access to the tools and you want something that you can specify and make sure it fits. So this is the route that I ended up going. I took it to a local performance shop that did a completely custom fabricated exhaust for me, and you get some of the same perks as DIY. You can specify your tubing diameter. You can specify how many sensors you want installed and where. You can specify cat, high flow cat, or none at all if you want. Mufflers, resonators, again, huge swath of choice there. The biggest downside is that you're paying somebody else for labor, so your cost is going to be much higher. Like I said, this is the route I took, and we'll go over the full cost of everything for this swap in the final video of the series. But just for now, know that if you're going to do a custom setup like this, the exhaust alone is probably going to cost more than your actual drivetrain did. For my system, I ended up going with 3-inch diameter piping, a very high flow cat, reusing part of the stock Civic SI header with the end cut off for a different flange, and a fairly loud resonator muffler. We'll see if that ends up being too loud for my taste. But for now, that's what I went with. Okay, with all those options discussed and out of the way, I've got word from our local performance shop. The exhaust is done. It's been a couple weeks and they totally knocked it out super fast for me. They sent me some progress pictures and video, but I haven't actually heard it start yet. But hopefully today we're going to go pick it up, see how it sounds, see how everything turned out, and then theoretically just drive it home. It should be ready to use on the street. So let's check it out and see how they did. Oh man, this thing sounds awesome, and now we're actually going to take it on the street. I am so excited. So we're going to drive this home, do a little bit of heat wrap maybe on some portions of the exhaust that are kind of near the fuel tank and whatnot, get our O2 sensor hooked up, and then that'll about round it out for this video. I did discover that I'm leaking a bit of coolant from down here, so that's not great, but that should be somewhat easy to get to and take care of. Alright, so now that I've got the vehicle back home, I have a couple more things to do to the exhaust to finish it up. I need to put in my O2 sensor, obviously, and I've got a couple spots on the exhaust I'll show you in a minute that I'm going to wrap with titanium cloth to help with some heat. But the coolant leak is a great reminder of something else I wanted to bring up in this episode, which is keeping a very close eye on maintenance while you're finishing up this swap. I know it's super fun once it's actually drivable to just get it on the road, just totally send it, but you'll want to be extra careful for the first bit of time after this is done. Get an alignment, obviously, once you put your suspension back together. If your clutch was replaced and the manufacturer recommends a certain break-in period for that, definitely follow that as well. And of course, keep a close eye on your fluids. Check your oil levels, make sure you bleed your clutch again, just to be sure that that's in good working order. And the coolant leak I have is originally a fitting that I sort of mangled, taking the old engine out. So I repaired that, put some hose clamps on and gronked them down real good, and that solved the leak. But that left a ton of air trapped in my system that I didn't originally bleed very effectively. So I actually got a couple overheating warnings the last couple times I've taken this out for a spin. I've done now 3 bleeding burping cycles to get the air out. Things are finally cycling through. My heater core is still working fine. I've got head air back in the cabin, and that's all going well. But I just want to make sure you keep in mind that even after your engine is installed, it's not home free. You definitely want to keep a close eye on all of those maintenance items for a while and make sure everything's running great. So with that said, let's pull this back into the garage and dive underneath and start taking a look at what's left to do with the exhaust. All right, we've got our OEM Civic O2 sensor installed here in the exhaust. Here's the pigtail for that. And I'm going to have to route this harness up here by the shifter cables. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of forgetting to specify where I wanted my O2 sensor bung. There's actually a clip over here on the side of the factory heat shield for the other sensor on the stock exhaust system that I could have used, but unfortunately this ended up getting put on the other side. So I did have to trim my heat shield a little bit. that is where this is going to come in. This is that titanium heat wrap that I picked up. Do make sure you're in long sleeves and gloves for this. There's lots of little tiny fibers that can really dig into your skin there. So I'm going to use that. And the first section of the exhaust we're going to wrap is basically starting from in front of this O2 sensor. We're going to go forward and wrap up to this joint right before the actual header. Alright, so here's what my setup ended up being under here. The OEM heat shields stacked up here, our heat wrap going up to the header, and then I just used like a little stainless pipe clamp here for my O2 sensor wire. Time will only tell how reliable this is going to be, but I'm going to run with it for a while and hopefully it goes well. I actually ended up not needing an extension for the O2 sensor harness. The tuner's one had the perfect length, so I've got it routed up through, sorry it's hard to focus in here. The orange clip back there is where the IMA cable originally passed through, so I've got it snuggled in there, and I'm going to zip tie it back a little bit just to make sure that it's actually hanging up and away from the exhaust rather than down next to it. So just give it a little bit of pull there to make sure it's a little farther away from the heat source. But that's about it for the O2 sensor. I did idle the engine again for a bit for one to check that that coolant leak patch was working, and also to let the titanium wrap burn in. According to the place I bought this from, it will smoke for a while after initial installation as the metal adjusts to the high heat and gets set or whatever. So don't be alarmed if you do wrap it and you see some light smoke coming out for the first little bit after you run the engine. Well, let's move on to the back. The other section of the exhaust I want to wrap is this section back here right before the axle where it kind of snakes around my fuel tank. It's awfully close there, so I'm going to give it some heat wrap just to be safe. And we also need to work on getting some extra space for our emergency brake or parking brake cable. That I do not want contacting the exhaust at all. The shop that did the exhaust just kind of tied it over here for me, but you can see it's still touching a bit, and that's something I don't want destroyed, so we're going to find a way to move that out of the way as well. After removing a bunch of plastic push pins and two 10mm bolts up here near the front, we can easily see the pathway of the emergency brake cable. And it comes across those beams through these little holders. There's where it's hitting my exhaust, and it keeps coming down this way back to the axles. So we have extra length here that needs to get dealt with. Now back here I actually do have another bracket that's just been hanging loose. It must have attached to the OEM exhaust somewhere. And my original plan, which you can see has already failed, was to just run a bolt through the existing hole in the top, drill a little hole in the corner of my heat shield here, and attach the two together. This will keep this tucked far enough away from the exhaust that the cable shouldn't get damaged. However, my bolt and nut cross-threaded on the first try, so I ended up having to rip that out unceremoniously. But that's okay, because if I bolted in right there, this is actually way too far down below the car for this plastic shield to fit back up. So I'm going to cut this bracket about in half, drill a new hole up here in the heat shield, and reattach them that way. And that should still give us overall enough space on the exhaust without too tight of curvature on the cable as it comes back here, and plenty of ground clearance too. It's a bit janky, but there's my solution. Enough of a gap on the pipe, and I did also bend this bracket here a bit just to give the curves a bit more lenience in the right direction. So now my plastics will clear, and let's throw some wrap on this section of the pipe. So here's what I ended up with, and of course feel free to critique me or give advice if I didn't do a great job on this wrap. Like a lot of other stuff on the swap, it is my first time dealing with this stuff, but I think it turned out alright, although I did still manage to get some titanium fibers inside my sleeves, which are itching pretty good. But I think that's all I'm going to cover for the exhaust. And the e-brake cable is nicely tucked away, although I did cut a little notch in the plastic here for it to escape, just to make sure everything's still sat flush. So overall, I think the bottom is looking pretty good. with the exhaust system finally done and out of the way, and I think also my coolant system in the clear, the last thing we need to do is take care of our air conditioning system, and I'll cover that in the next video. That is the only thing keeping me from putting my windshield wiper cowling back on and getting the front end body parts rebuilt. So that's about it for now. So our K-swap is nearing completion. Right now I feel that this car is actually pretty streetable right now, but we do still have some things left to do. So one thing, as I said, the air conditioning, we're going to get that hooked up in the next video, get that all taken care of. We also still have some check engine light codes on the dash. One of them is for the downstream O2 sensor being disconnected. I don't plan to put one in, and hopefully that's something we can code out with the Honda I have or something similar like a K-tuner. We also have a code for the air-fuel ratio being too lean. Again, hopefully something to tune with the Honda will solve. And then finally, there is a code for the AC pressure sensor not being connected. That'll get taken care of in the next video. We do also have our ABS and traction control lights on. I'm not sure if that's related to the swap. It might need the sensors need to be reprogrammed. It could be something totally unrelated or just a byproduct of the other codes I just mentioned. So we'll try and get that solved pretty soon. But for now, I think that about wraps up everything I want to cover in this video. I do want to say that if you have questions about the swap so far, things I may have missed, or just stuff you want clarification on, please do leave them in the comments. I may not respond directly, but I'm planning to do a video in the end of this series where I cover anything that I may have forgotten to go over, or questions specifically that you guys want to know about the swap. This is for 2011 or 2012 specifically, and I don't claim to be a Honda expert or even a Series Z expert, but I will do my best to provide as much info as I can to help you guys out. So until the next video, thank you so much for watching.
Tools and parts laying all around. I got the hood up and the engine on the ground. Lowering the Honda up in the HP. Heart surgery with the K20Z3. Switching motors, tuning tight. Racing fast into the night.